In this lecture, we are going to talk about references and values. So there is a crucial difference in programming languages between call by reference and call by value. So first of all, let's talk about call by value. In these cases, just a copy of the original variable is paused, so the original variable will not be changed. Okay, I know that it is a bit confusing, so what is happening exactly? So, in programming languages such as C, C++, or Java, we have this feature, the so-called call by value. So what does it mean? That if we define a given variable, for example 10, and then if we have a function, for example, we would like to change the value of a given variable. For example, we can increment the value by 1. So if we call this function on the a variable and after we print out the value of a, and this is exactly what is called call by value. So in programming languages, usually what's going to happen? If we have this variable a and we call this change function with this a variable, then under the hood, the programming language is going to create a copy of that variable, and here we increment the value of another variable because the programming language has created a copy of variable a. So basically the change in the value is not going to be reflected outside the scope of the function. And basically this is what's going to happen in Python as well, although the reason is not the same as with other programming languages such as C++ or Java. So if I run the application, then as you can see, despite the fact that we have incremented the value by 1 in the change function, this change is not reflected outside the scope of the function. So this is the so-called call by value, which means that just a copy of the original variable is paused, so the original variable will not be changed. What about call by reference? The variable itself is paused, so the original variable may be altered. In Java, for example, we are dealing with call by value when we use primitive types such as int, double, float or something like this, and we are dealing with call by reference with reference types and objects such as, for example, custom objects, array lists, linked lists, and so on. So this is the case in Java. If you may recall what we have been talking about a few lectures earlier, that in Python every variable is an object basically. So we may come to the conclusion that call by reference is going to be applied. But of course this is not the case. A as an integer is an object in Python, and despite the fact that it is an object type, whenever we call a function with a as the input, the function is not going to change the value of the original variable. So it is quite strange in Python because here we have to deal with something different. Here we are using pass by object reference. So it depends on whether the variable is mutable or immutable. So you may pose the question that, okay, why are we talking about the Java programming language or the C++ programming language? And as far as I am concerned, it is quite important to see the difference between given programming languages. So this is why for me it is quite an interesting topic as far as call by value and call by references are concerned, because this is the crucial difference between Python and other programming languages. Because here with Python programming language there is no call by value, neither call by reference, because here we are dealing with pass by object reference. So the result depends on whether the variable is mutable or immutable. So because integers, floats, and strings are immutable objects in Python, this is why we are not able to change the values, which means that if we have this change function that is going to get an input and we increment the value by 1, for example, and we have an a variable 10, we call this change function on the a variable and then we print out a, then nothing's going to happen. Python is not going to increment the value because integers, floating point numbers, and strings are immutable. So Python is not going to change the value of immutable objects. For example, if we have a string, my name is Kevin and we change the value, this is a new value, and we rerun the application, then as you can see, Python is not going to change the value of strings because strings are immutable objects. We can do the same with floating point numbers 30.5. We would like to reinitialize the value to 60.5, and if I rerun the application, as you can see, Python is not going to change the value of floating point numbers because these are immutable objects. What about mutable objects? Python is able to change the values of mutable objects. And this is why Python has something to do with the so-called pass-by object reference. Which means that if we have objects, for example, we define a one-dimensional array of lists, for example, Kevin, then 10 and true, then we can define a function again that is going to add a given item to the list. So if we have this L list, then we can call the append function with a new item. So this is a new item. And if we do something like this and call this add item function on the list and print out the list, sorry for that, we are not able to use the list because it is a keyword in Python. For example, my list with an underscore. So if we use something like this, then the result is going to be the updated list. So in this case, we are able to change the value of the underlying list data structure with the help of a function. And this is exactly what we have been talking about, that Python is able to change the values of mutable objects. So in this case, L is the list. Lists are mutable in Python, so this is why we are able to manipulate the items with the help of a function. We are not able to do the same with integers, floating point numbers and strings. We are not able to change and manipulate the values of these variables because these variables are immutable objects. So again, it is quite crucial that in other programming languages we have call by value and we have call by reference. As far as the Python programming language is concerned, basically we have the so-called pass by object reference, which means that it depends on whether the given variable is mutable or immutable. So we can change the value of a given variable with the help of a given function, for example, if the given object is mutable, and we are not able to change the value of a given variable if the object is immutable. Okay, so this is how Python works. Thanks for watching.